A trauma bond is a strong emotional connection between two people that's based on manipulation, coercion, and abuse. The trauma bond is a term used to describe when someone is attracted to or continues to date someone who is bad for them. Let's take a minute and please subscribe, hit the bell icon to get notified about new videos when they're being posted. So a trauma bond, it occurs when someone becomes emotionally attached to or perceives themselves as financially dependent on an abusive partner. And it's also when they're emotionally dependent. So a variety of forms of abuse may lead to trauma bonding, and the effects can be persistent and long after leaving an abusive relationship. So, these bonds are the strongest in unhealthy relationships when there is an abuser and a victim. They are controlling, or they put us down, or they're just generally toxic. But for some reason, we can't seem to break away from them. It's really very, very difficult. And that is because we have formed a trauma bond. These bonds are incredibly strong, and they can be very, very difficult to break, but it is important to break them because they are usually based on unhealthy patterns and behaviors. We've all been there. I've been there. You meet someone, and then they seem great at first, but then we start to see their true colors. We start to see some of these behaviors that we did not see in the beginning that become somewhat concerning. So, the bond, it is very difficult to break, and it is formed through a cycle of abuse. However, it is really important for us to understand the dynamics of the trauma bond and how to go about breaking it. It is important to break it because it is secular, and it's something that you can go through over and over again if you're unable to break the bond. So in this video, I want to talk about what the trauma bond is, how to break it, and why you should break it. So it's a form of attachment that can form between two people who have been through a traumatic experience together. Oftentimes, there are people who have been through traumatic experiences separate, and they come together in an unhealthy and toxic relationship. So this bond is different from a healthy, supportive relationship as it's built on the foundation of fear, manipulation, and abuse. And so if you have been trauma bonded to someone, it can be difficult to break free from this relationship. However, it is possible to heal from a trauma by bonding and building healthy, supportive relationships in your life. So as it is very difficult, and people seem to go through this over and over again, it is completely possible to break free from this kind of bond. So there are some people who are more susceptible to trauma bonding. Some of these people are people with relational and emotional trauma and are typically targeted by the perpetrators in a trauma bond, either intentionally or otherwise. It can be common for abusers to seek out strong, driven, educated, and independent thinkers so that they can make themselves feel very superior when they finally break them down. And that is what they're wanting to do, is to break a person down so that they can easily control and manipulate them through this trauma bond. Some of the other risk factors for trauma bonding can include people with dependency issues and very dependent personalities. Anyone who puts a lot of value in the good times, and they think only about the good times, and they're quick to forgive and forget about all the bad times that they have experienced. Anyone who has a history of being abused in childhood or past relationships. Oftentimes these people will easily be in a trauma bond with someone else who has come up in an unhealthy relationship or have bad experiences in past relationships. Also, people who are disorganized, who are anxious, and who have avoidant attachments. People who also have the tendency to question themselves, even despite the strong evidence that suggests that they aren't to blame. When you know you're not to blame, but you take on the blame for the person, the perpetrator, because they oftentimes project the blame onto you, and then you end up taking on the blame, even though you know that you're not to blame. So people with existing mental health concerns, such as depression, bipolar disorder, and anxiety. Also people with separation anxiety, people who are afraid to be abandoned, people who are very sensitive to being rejected. So there are 7 stages of trauma bonding, and the 7 stages of trauma bonding are: number 1, love bombing. If any of you have been in a relationship with a narcissist, you should be familiar with love bombing. This involves a sudden, intense attempt to create the we in a relationship through high praise and excessive flattery. While this dynamic typically occurs between a perpetrator and a victim of abuse, it can sometimes involve other people that are surrounding the couple. Sometimes, in some abusive circumstances, the abuser may seem oblivious to their manipulation. However, that is typically not the case in a trauma bond. Most people who are doing these the love bombing techniques, they've done it before, they're very familiar with it, and they know that it's creating a trauma bond. So in a trauma bond, love bombing can subtly set the stage for an abusive dynamic by allowing the abuser to prey on the victim's emotions, deep hopes, desires, and dreams. It is similar to someone saying, look at what I can offer you. No one else has or will love you like this. And they do make you feel that way by offering you gifts and showers of love, time and attention. And you almost feel like, why would you resist this? But oftentimes it's the beginning of creating that trauma bond, causing the victim to let their guard down and to trust the abuser's intentions, fostering positive feelings and validation between the possible perpetrator and the victim. It's proving that the abuser does have good intentions. You know, why would they do all these really nice things if they had bad intentions for me? I've never been shown this kind of kindness and love before. It also provides a sense of stability and security. You know, why would a person who has bad intentions for me be doing all of these very loving things for me? So the second stage of trauma bonding is trust and dependency. So in this stage, the abuser may purposefully test the victim's trust and dependency on them, usually leading to target the feeling guilty or for questioning their partner. Doubts are expected in healthy relationships, and it does take time to get to know someone, not only for what they say, but also for what they do. So when confronting the abuser at this stage, you may get a lot of flack for discounting all that they've done for you, which is why the love bombing stage provides a vital step. It's the vital setup for the dependency. In trauma bonds, the idea that you can trust the abuser in the relationship, it is an illusion. So they're setting up that, you know, all of the love, the time, the attention, and then they're setting up trust. And you should be able to trust. So criticism. So once they've got your trust, the emotional abuser may start to pick apart some of your qualities, identifying them as insignificant or problematic. These may be qualities that they liked in the beginning, but now they don't like them. So this criticism can seem and feel sudden, especially after experiencing the love bombing stage. But it is common for abusers to wait until the victim's trust has been tested before they begin criticizing them. The criticism phase is most noticeable during intense arguments or disagreements where the abuser will likely blame their partner and the target may end up over apologizing for things that aren't their fault. Again, that's the projection. The perpetrator makes the target feel like everything is their fault, and they will begin to apologize to make things back to normal. So there's no problem. So they may start to think in the lines of, wow, he or she loves me and forgives me even when I mess up. You're right. I'm so sorry for questioning you. You want what's best for me, so you're right. This back and forth dance of harsh criticism and over apologizing is the glue forming this trauma bond. And so people often, you know, second guess themselves, and they just want things to be back to the way they used to. So that's why they do the over apologizing due to projection. So number 4, manipulation and gaslighting. Gaslighting and manipulation are the two forms of psychological abuse often seen in trauma bonds that ultimately make victims question their reality and their perception. Gaslighters will never fully or honestly take responsibility for their behaviors, and they tend to shift the blame onto the other person. This is very typical of a narcissist. They will never accept blame. They always shift responsibility, and they will project what they're doing onto the victim. So it's common for gaslighters to suddenly seem calm, cool, and collected once they have pushed their target to their breaking point. Gaslighting is a textbook behavior among common types of abusers like narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. Fighting back or challenging the abuser can often feel like it will never result in anything good, which sometimes leads to reactive abuse by the target. This term refers to seemingly abusive behaviors committed by the target towards the oppressor out of blinding rage, survival, psychological preservation. So it's usually they've been pushed to a point where they react. And if someone was just looking at the victim reacting, they would tend to think they were the abuser, but it's just that they are reacting to the behavior that has been done to them. So it's normal for victims who engage in reactive abuse to feel extremely guilty and concerned when their behavior turns physical, leading the target to abuse or to further question their identity, primarily because of gaslighting. So the abuser seeks to isolate the target from anything and anyone that gives them a sense of reassurance, normalcy, and independence. The next stage is resignation and giving up. So when dealing with a trauma bond, it's common for targets of abuse to start giving in at some point to avoid conflict. The fawn trauma response or bargaining, people-pleasing behaviors may ensure the relationship can remain somewhat stable. Targets have some awareness that they are being manipulated, but that small awareness may not be enough to exit the relationship. They may not be ready to exit the relationship. And they still may be questioning whether or not they are to blame for the abuser's behavior. So depending on the length of the relationship and the nature of the psychological abuse, a target often becomes more dependent on the abuser to avoid further conflict by getting married, having children, or becoming more emotionally and financially reliant on their partner. And these are all not good things when you're in a very unhealthy relationship, to become more tied to your abuser. So there are many reasons why an abused person cannot easily leave, including safety concerns. And those are very, very important concerns and things to really consider. So it's natural to fear that an abuser's behavior may escalate when they sense they are losing control, when a target is threatening to leave or actually walking out the door. Things can escalate and they can become physical or deadly in many domestic disputes. Yeah, it's most dangerous time when the abuser feels like their victim or target may be wanting to leave the situation. So that is one of the most dangerous times in an abusive relationship. So there's loss of self. Throughout the stages of the trauma bond, there is a progressive loss of self, which begins a tremendous pain and a disconnection from the world that we once knew. People who leave abusive relationships may not seem like they are their usual selves due to the loss of their own personal identity and their own personal boundaries. And that's something that we see, that people lower and lessen their personal boundaries in these types of relationships, and to maintain or to get their control back, they have to maintain personal boundaries. So trauma bonds can be incredibly isolating. You can lose many of your social connections due to changes in your self-identity that no longer match what people close to you are used to. This level of psychological destruction may lead to a complete loss of confidence and even suicidal ideation. For many, this emotional torture, shame, and guilt is built up for years, which can make it difficult to face and to also move forward. There's an addiction to this cycle. So often in trauma bonds, the stages can be cyclical. After a significant conflict, there may be a cool down or a honeymoon period. And at this moment of peace, the abuser might apologize and start the love bombing process all over again, which makes the target feel relieved and desired, thus positively reinforcing the dependency on this abusive cycle. I have often heard people say this, and I've felt this myself. You want to get to that area of peace again, but the cycle then begins to start over, and it is not a positive cycle, and it's very abusive and unhealthy. So there are 7 stages of the trauma bonding experience, and it is a repeated cycle of extreme highs and lows of an abusive relationship, which often lead the victim to feeling isolated, lacking identity, and staying in the relationship for far too long. However, breaking the trauma bond, it is very possible, and support is readily available. In addition to forming social support systems and creating a safety plan, it is important to partner with a mental health professional who is highly trained and skilled in psychological abuse recovery. Trauma bonding is a form of bonding that occurs in abusive relationships. It is characterized by a strong emotional connection between the abuser and the victim, which is often reinforced by periods of love and care. If you are in an abusive relationship, it is important to seek help from a therapist or support group. There are many resources available online. When I was going through this, I used an online therapy group and an online support groups through Circle's support group on narcissistic relationship support, and also meetup support groups. The most help that I will tell you that I received actually came from the Most High God. Most High God guided me through the emotional trauma and got me through healing and the growth process to lead me to the other side of this painful process. I'm not sure who you look to, but if you do look to God, I encourage you to reach out to God and ask for help. I would not have made it through without the support of God, my angels, my ancestors, and my spirit guides. So for more information on narcissistic personality disorder, please check out the next video in our series, and also feel free to use the comments to share your experience with NPD. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified about our new videos being posted. Thank you.